She has already died 4 times, and every single life ended in tragedy. Betrayed, murdered, sacrificed, and abandoned, but this time, she refuses to die again. Just when she thinks she has no one left to save her, she remembers the one being who once stood by her side, which is something completely unexpected. The story begins with Musee standing alone in a grand ballroom while couples dance around her. She realizes this is the 5th time she has witnessed the same scene. Across the room, her fiancé, Alfred, dances with another woman. The annual dance party at St. Belferia Academy is in full swing, with students dressed in formal tuxedos and gowns. But Musee can only focus on Alfred, who has chosen to attend with someone else. Alfred, the heir to the dukedom, gazes down with a gentle smile. Aliciella looks up at him with a bright, delighted expression. She is the woman Alfred is escorting instead of his own fiancé. Musee recalls the countless lives she has already lived and everything she experienced in each one. Her father, the head of the Schnorr family, is an earl. Musee was engaged to Alfred as part of a political alliance between their families, but Musee truly loved him. She studied relentlessly, worked hard to earn his affection, and even drove away other women to protect her place as his fiancée. Yet all that effort meant nothing. The moment Aliciella appeared, she took everything our girl had fought so hard to keep. At this point, you already know this won't end well, so subscribe and let's find out what happens. Musee is left alone while Alfred and Aliciella stand together on the other side of the ballroom. Musee's heart races as she struggles to understand what is happening. She stumbles into a man carrying a drink, and the glass slips from his hand and shatters on the floor. The broken glass reflects fragments of Musee's past. One shard shows Alfred happily standing beside Aliciella, while the others reveal the painful moments she has endured in her previous lives. Her eyes widen as the truth hits her. She has already lived through this exact moment 4 times. This is her 5th life. Once again, Alfred brings Aliciella to the dance party as his partner, completely disregarding his actual fiancé. Blood drips as the memory shifts toward the disaster awaiting her 4 months later. Musee knows exactly what awaits her. 4 months from now, she will be killed. Terror takes over as she covers her face, tears streaming from her eyes. In her first life, Alfred and the Prime Minister's son exiled Musee from the country. While wandering afterward, she was attacked by an unknown assailant and killed. Her second life ended when a knight who idolized Aliciella murdered her. In her third life, Musee was kidnapped and brutally mistreated before falling ill and eventually dying. In her 4th life, Musee was chosen as a sacrifice for the Church of the Evil Dragon. She thought Alfred had finally come to save her, only for him to kill her himself. No matter how her life changed, the ending was always the same: death. The man checks if Musee is alright after the glass shatters, but she barely responds. For the first time, she realizes that she had never remembered her previous lives until now. Musee covers her face in shock. With all her past memories back, she may finally have a chance to change her fate. But that hope quickly fades. Changing her future will not be nearly as easy as she thought. The people who killed her in her previous lives were all influenced by Aliciella. Now Musee has no idea who might turn against her next. Tears stream down her face as fear takes over. After dying 4 times, Musee knows exactly how terrifying her fate can be. She once loved Alfred despite knowing that his heart belonged to Aliciella. But when Musee looks at him now, she feels nothing. With her memories restored, whatever love she had for Alfred is gone. Musee walks up to him and calls his name. Alfred turns around with an irritated glare and asks what she wants, while Aliciella watches from behind him. Musee can see the contempt in Alfred's expression. His cold attitude toward her is nothing new. She stands her ground and asks Alfred to call off their engagement. Musee points out the obvious. Alfred clearly prefers Aliciella anyway. She knows he has never cared for her, so she refuses to waste her life trying to become a wife he does not want. Musee makes her position clear. She will not force a marriage where she is unwanted. The guests stare in shock as the confrontation unfolds. Alfred is caught off guard by her sudden demand. But ending the engagement is not that simple. Their marriage was arranged by both families, regardless of how either of them feels about it. As the Duke's heir, Alfred knows he cannot simply break the agreement. Alfred keeps his eyes on Aliciella, making Musee feel completely invisible. She can barely stand the situation anymore and just wants to escape. Then Musee gives him a sharp smile and offers another option. If he refuses to end the engagement, she can remain his wife in name only, while everyone spends their lives gossiping about Aliciella as his real wife. Aliciella's eyes widen with tears as she immediately objects, insisting she would never do something like that. Alfred steps in front of Aliciella and angrily demands how Musee could say something so cruel. Musee scoffs at the accusation. To her, the truth is hardly cruel. She fires back, asking why Alfred refuses to take his fiancé's hand if her words are really so cruel. At this point, she feels like she is the only sane person in the room. Musee starts wondering if Alfred is truly that blind, or if she is the one losing her mind. She tells Alfred to find a way to end their engagement. After all, death has already taken everything from her 4 times. The ballroom falls silent. Everyone stares in shock while Alfred struggles to process what Musee has just said. Alfred reminds her that, as the daughter of an earl, she should already understand how these political arrangements work. Musee lowers her gaze and quietly admits that she understands, but understanding does not make the pain disappear. She feels exhausted, miserable, and desperate for someone to save her. Then she remembers her 4th life, when she once sat peacefully beside a massive dragon and gently stroked its head. A sharp, reptilian eye opens, glowing gold against the dragon's dark scales. Tears stream down Musee's face as she silently calls out to Ragna, begging him to save her. Deep within a dark void, a small dragon lies curled up in a faint glow. Then, his eye suddenly opens. The dragon slowly unfolds his massive wings as glowing specks drift through the darkness around him. The scene shifts to the Schnorr estate. 2 days have passed since the dance. Musee lies confined to her room, with nothing but her thoughts to keep her company. Her confinement was hardly surprising after she publicly demanded the end of her engagement. Even so, she never expected her own family to lock her away. Neither the Schnorrs nor the Duke's family plan to interfere with Alfred and Aliciella. Musee knows what comes next. They will grow closer, have a child, and live happily while she eventually gets killed again. Our girl sits up, determined to break this cycle. She refuses to die again and starts searching for a way to escape her fate. Then she remembers her 4th life with the dragon. For some reason, that memory brings her a sense of comfort. Musee has not met Ragna in this life, yet she still wishes he would come save her. In her 4th life, he became the only person she could truly rely on before her death. She remembers Ragna telling her not to die. If she could see him again, maybe she would not feel so afraid. Tears stream down her face as she clutches her collar and quietly calls Ragna's name. She is terrified. A sudden knock at the door startles her. Musee turns toward it and nervously asks who is there. A voice from outside informs her that Alfred has come to see her. Musee's eyes widen as panic immediately sets in. She tries to refuse, claiming that she is not feeling well, but 3 maids suddenly enter the room and make it clear that her refusal will not be accepted. Our girl stares at them in shock as they explain that the head of the household ordered her to receive Alfred. She realizes she has no choice but to face him. Downstairs, Alfred waits on a sofa with an officer standing behind him. Musee enters the room, clutching her shawl as Alfred calmly sits on the sofa with a drink in hand. Her attention immediately shifts to the officer behind him. His short, light hair and sharp eyes look strangely familiar. Then it hits her. This is the same man who raised his sword and killed her in her 2nd life. Alfred remarks that she took long enough to come down. Musee quietly apologizes for the delay. She grips the edge of the sofa, trying to hide her fear as sweat forms on her face. Unable to ignore the danger, Musee nervously asks who the man behind Alfred is. Alfred introduces him as Jean Bista, his friend and personal guard. He is a prospective knight from the Academy's Knight Department, hired because of his exceptional skills. Jean gives Musee a polite greeting with an unsettling smile. Musee nervously introduces herself in return, but the moment she sees his expression, a chill runs through her. Jean's smile never reaches his eyes. Musee asks why he has come to see her. Alfred gives her a stern look and says he wants to discuss her behavior. Musee looks at him nervously, wondering what she did wrong. Alfred slams his hand against the sofa and accuses her of making Aliciella cry. He angrily brings up Musee's remarks at the dance, especially her claim that everyone would see Aliciella as his true wife. He demands to know if she understands how much those words hurt her. Musee can barely believe what she is hearing. Aliciella is being treated like the victim, even though Musee is the one who has suffered for years. She snaps that she genuinely does not understand. Alfred immediately accuses her of pretending not to. Jean's expression turns cold. He suddenly draws his sword and glares at Musee. The blade slams into the sofa right beside her, leaving our girl frozen in terror. Musee screams and cowers as Jean stands over her with his sword drawn. A maid calls out to Musee in concern as she trembles uncontrollably on the sofa. Alfred calls Jean's name in shock and insists he only meant to reprimand Musee for showing no remorse. Jean coldly defends himself. Since he never actually killed her, he insists he did nothing wrong. Musee's heart pounds as she remembers her 2nd life, when Jean cut her to pieces. She wonders if this is how she will die again. Fear overwhelms her. She has no idea what to do anymore and can only pray for someone to save her. Tears roll down her face as she clutches her chest and whispers Ragna's name, begging him to save her. Suddenly, a powerful gust tears through the Schnorr estate. The sky darkens, and the entire house begins to shake. Alfred stares outside in shock, wondering why the sky suddenly turned pitch black. Jean offers to inspect the grounds while Musee turns toward the window. A familiar presence washes over Musee. A tear forms in her eye as the silhouette of a flying dragon appears in the darkness. Musee stumbles backward in disbelief. A massive dragon has appeared right outside the window. Tears fill our girl's eyes as she recognizes Ragna. The massive dragon leans close to the window while she whispers his name in disbelief. Musee reaches toward him with tears of joy and relief. After everything she has endured, she has finally found her only true ally again. A massive shadow sweeps over the royal capital of Noviesta, plunging the entire kingdom into darkness. The townsfolk panic as the sky suddenly turns pitch black. King Freddy von Noviesta watches in terror as the shadow engulfs his kingdom. Through the window, the king and his men see a gigantic creature with a body black as night, looming over the entire capital. Ancient legends tell of a terrifying monster that feeds on human despair and whose true form will bring about the end of the world. Trembling in horror, King Freddy identifies the creature as the evil dragon of ruin. It is the legendary beast destined to destroy the world. Tears fill Musee's eyes as she reaches toward the giant dragon and softly calls Ragna's name. Inside the room, Musee faces the window while Jean and Alfred watch. Suddenly, Jean hears a sharp sound. Jean draws his sword and demands to know if Musee caused the sudden commotion. Alfred calls out to Jean in surprise as Musee stands nearby with a dark expression. A thunderous roar fills the room as the massive dragon crashes through the window. Jean groans and grabs his head while Alfred and the maids shield themselves from the flying glass. The dragon lands outside the shattered window and realizes Musee has been here all along. Musee gazes at its jet-black scales and golden eyes as the dragon moves closer. A tearful smile spreads across her face. She recognizes the so-called evil dragon from her fourth life and feels relieved to see Ragna again. Ragna looks down at her and demands to know who she is. Musee realizes he does not remember her in this lifetime. She politely apologizes for the sudden introduction and tells him her name. Ragna makes it clear that he does not know Musee and insists that this is their first meeting. Musee clutches her collar and quietly agrees with Ragna. Ragna admits that his heart cries out to her even though he does not know her. He explains that Musee's voice woke him, telling him that she was important to him. Our girl smiles softly, feeling that hearing those words from Ragna is all she needs. Tears roll down her cheek as she feels saved simply by meeting him and knowing she was on someone's mind. With a bright smile, Musee urges Ragna to flee before the Church of the Evil Dragon finds him. She explains that the group worships Ragna and plans to use his power to destroy the world. Ragna eyes her suspiciously and asks what she knows about the church. Musee admits she knows only a little, but warns that the church will capture Ragna within a year. Ragna glares at her and asks if she is a member of the church. Our girl denies being part of the church, but warns that Ragna's appearance will soon force both the church and the kingdom to act. Alfred stares in disbelief as he and Jean struggle to understand what is happening. Ragna quietly gazes down at Musee as she gives him a gentle smile. Musee realizes that speaking with Ragna has sealed her fate and that she will likely be executed. Since the evil dragon of ruin is destined to destroy the world, anyone who can communicate with it will be branded a conspirator and eliminated. Ragna realizes Musee has no intention of revealing anything else. Musee calmly tells him that she has nothing more to say. Ragna's eyes glow as he decides to search through her memories instead. Musee reaches out in panic and protests. A surge of power engulfs her as two enormous glowing eyes appear in the darkness. Fragments of Musee's past lives drift through the darkness, revealing her memories to Ragna. Ragna lets out a quiet huff as he watches Musee through the shattered window. He asks her to choose between him and the two men who killed her. Musee stares in shock, caught off guard by the question. Tears fill her eyes as she smiles warmly and says the choice is obvious. She would choose Ragna. Ragna gives her a gentle look and praises her answer. Jean steps forward and grips his weapon tightly while Alfred watches him. Jean raises his sword behind Musee, ready to strike as she faces the broken window. Ragna glares at him and commands the human not to move. A crushing force fills the room, leaving Alfred, Jean, and the maids frozen in fear. Jean breaks into a cold sweat as he realizes he cannot move a muscle. Our girl flexes her hand and realizes she is the only one who can still move. She marvels at the evil dragon's overwhelming power. Ragna looks down at Musee and offers to protect her. Musee stares up at him in surprise and softly calls his name. She watches as Ragna extends one massive claw toward the open window. A glowing magic circle forms around his sharp claws. A powerful gust sweeps through the window as Ragna unleashes his magic. Musee watches in amazement as the entire window crumbles into fine sand. Ragna scoops her into his arms and leaps into the sky, leaving Musee stunned. Musee asks if he has gotten smaller, and Ragna grins as he explains that he simply matched her size. Ragna tells Musee to stay quiet, warning that she could bite her tongue if she talks while flying. He spreads his massive wings and flies away from the estate with our girl in his arms. As they soar above the clouds, Musee looks down at the capital, stretching out below. She takes in the breathtaking view while safely cradled in Ragna's arms. Ragna explains that they met this time because she called out to him. With a grin, he tells her that their meeting marks a brand new beginning. Musee gasps as his words sink in. She remembers how meeting Ragna in her fourth life was a death sentence for her, but this time she met him before anything was set in stone, giving them a chance to change the future. A tear rolls down Musee's cheek as she leans closer and hugs Ragna tightly. As they fly across the open sky, our girl reflects that she still does not know when she will die, but this new beginning fills her with hope. She smiles softly, hoping to spend her fifth life with the evil dragon for as long as possible. Musee looks up at Ragna and asks where they are headed. She gasps when a grand structure comes into view and realizes it is the royal castle. Ragna heads straight for the castle towers, declaring that he has business with the king. The guards panic and scatter as the massive dragon approaches the castle. With a fierce grin, Ragna glares at the castle and calls for the king to come out. Ragna glares with his single sharp eye and declares that he has business with this country's king, ordering him to come forward. His massive shadow engulfs the royal castle grounds, throwing the guards into panic as they desperately call for reinforcements. A figure then steps onto the courtyard. King Freddy steps onto the castle grounds with a spear in hand and silently looks up at Ragna. Musee starts to call Ragna's name, but he quickly stops her and warns her not to say it. She quietly nods. Freddy stares in shock before nervously declaring that he is the king. Musee gasps when she realizes that the man before them is King Freddy. She knows Freddy as the wise ruler who single-handedly ended the country's civil war, earning a reputation as a skilled military and political leader. Ragna crashes into the courtyard before Freddy, still keeping Musee safely in his claws. Calling himself the evil dragon of ruin, Ragna says he has come to negotiate with Freddy. Freddy stammers in confusion at the mention of negotiations, unsure what Ragna wants. He nervously asks if the negotiations concern the young woman in Ragna's arms. Ragna huffs, impressed by Freddy's sharp instincts, and confirms that Musee is the reason he came. With a grin, Ragna reveals that he wants Musee as his mate and asks for the king's permission to live with her in the kingdom. Musee freezes in shock at the word mate, her face turning bright red. Freddy is equally stunned as the guards panic over the dragon settling in their kingdom. Ragna explains that his current home is impossible for humans to live in, so he has decided to adapt to Musee's way of life instead. Freddy nervously points out that Ragna does not actually need to live in this country. Ragna firmly replies that he still has business to take care of here. He mentions several people he needs to deal with, including Alfred from the Duke's family and Jean, who is standing nearby. A dark grin spreads across Ragna's face as he declares that he's going to kill them. Our girl gasps in shock, unable to understand why Ragna suddenly wants to kill them. Freddy is equally stunned by the dragon's declaration. Ragna says that once he is done, he will leave and never return to the country. Musee hesitates before questioning him. She looks up at Ragna and asks why he wants to kill Alfred. Ragna reminds her that Jean raised his sword against her, asking if that alone isn't enough reason, as he gently tightens his hold on her. He adds that Jean hurt the woman who has captured his heart. Ragna admits that healing magic isn't his strength and warns that trying to heal Musee could overwhelm her with too much power and kill her. His glowing eye narrows as he admits that seeing Musee hurt makes him want to destroy the entire country. Musee panics and tells him he cannot do that, but Ragna simply laughs. Ragna flashes a sharp grin and decides that if Musee won't allow him to destroy the country, he'll settle for killing a few specific people instead. Ragna considers the situation and casually notes that the royal capital might get demolished in the process. Below, Freddy and his guards remain frozen in fear. Freddy breaks into a nervous sweat, wondering if the dragon really just threatened to destroy the royal capital. He realizes that Alfred is the Duke's legitimate son and, more importantly, his own nephew. Freddy also knows exactly who Musee is. He grips his weapon tightly, realizing that letting a dragon kill his nephew over an attack on Musee would become a massive scandal. Ragna looks down at Freddy and offers a deal. If they are allowed to stay in the country, he is willing to compromise. His glowing eye narrows as he clarifies that his idea of compromise is simply postponing the capital's destruction. Freddy nervously asks if he means it's only a postponement, and Ragna confirms it without hesitation. Ragna points out that there's no telling when someone who raised a sword against a frail woman might try it again. Musee quietly listens. Freddy looks back in surprise when a voice from the castle archway calls out, asking His Majesty to wait. Two riders then approach on horseback. Alfred rides in alongside Jean and calls out to King Freddy, insisting that he did nothing wrong and demanding that the king defend him. Our girl recoils as Alfred glares directly at her. Alfred points at her angrily, claiming they saw everything, and blaming her for what happened. He accuses Musee of summoning the evil dragon, insisting that they only lowered their swords because of her actions. Musee stammers in shock, struggling to respond as Ragna quietly looks down at her. Ragna unleashes a deafening roar and orders them to stop their nonsense. The sheer pressure makes everyone below tremble in fear. He furiously declares that he came because they raised their swords against his beloved, making their own actions the reason he is here. Alfred gasps at the revelation, while Jean steps forward and angrily tells the evil dragon to shut up. Jean defends himself, insisting that all he did was point his sword at Musee. Ragna's eye twitches with irritation. Ragna spreads his massive wings as a dark aura erupts around him, keeping Musee safely secured in his arms. Freddy and the guards recoil in terror as Ragna's glowing eyes pierce through the darkness. He repeats Jean's excuse that all he did was point his sword at Musee. Jean angrily argues that Musee hurt Aliciella and made her cry, insisting that his reaction was justified. Ragna scoffs at Jean's excuse and lets out a dismissive laugh. He points out that Alfred brought another woman to a party despite being engaged to our girl. She simply asked to end their engagement after seeing it, so Ragna questions how that could possibly hurt Aliciella. Ragna bares his sharp teeth and coldly asks if they have all lost their minds. Alfred is stunned by the blunt accusation, while Freddy and the guards silently process what they just heard. Freddy begins to realize that Ragna might actually have a point. He admits to himself that the dragon's argument makes sense and that Alfred and Jean are the ones behaving irrationally. Alfred angrily rejects the accusation, insisting that Ragna is wrong and that Musee is the one who has lost her mind. He desperately begs Freddy not to believe a word Ragna or Musee says. Alfred desperately warns Freddy that the evil dragon will brainwash him if he listens to them. Musee shudders and clutches her chest as Ragna scoffs, calling Alfred an eyesore. His patience runs out. Ragna glares at Alfred and tells him to go ahead and die right there. Dark tendrils burst forth, binding Alfred and Jean before slamming them into the ground. Freddy urgently begs Ragna to stop, but he only huffs in response. Musee desperately tells Ragna to stop as well, making him pause and turn toward her. The dark tendrils vanish, releasing Alfred and Jean. Ragna turns his massive head toward Musee and softly calls her name, seemingly wondering why she stopped him. Musee reaches toward him and gently explains that he doesn't need to get his hands dirty for them because they aren't worth the effort. She smiles warmly through her tears and assures him that she's fine. Knowing he wanted to protect her is already more than enough. Ragna grumbles that Musee is far too kind, then wonders if he was being a little too forceful. He leans closer and asks if she stopped him because she still loves Alfred. Musee giggles, leaving Ragna to call her name in confusion. She blushes and smiles, saying his worried expression made him look like a cute little puppy. Ragna's reptilian eye widens in surprise at being called cute. He looks away and mutters that if making her laugh is enough, then he doesn't mind. Musee relaxes comfortably in his arms. Ragna turns back to Freddy and says they should get back to business. The king nervously agrees. He raises a massive claw and offers another deal. If they are allowed to stay, he will also protect the kingdom whenever necessary. Freddy and the guards gasp in surprise. Ragna explains that officially protecting the kingdom would anger other countries, so his help will simply come whenever he happens to be around. He makes it clear that everything he's doing is for Musee, warning that anyone who harms her will face the consequences. Ragna flashes a chilling grin and warns that if anything happens to Musee, he will destroy the entire country, or perhaps even the world. The guards freeze in terror at the horrifying ultimatum. Freddy breaks into a nervous sweat before agreeing to Ragna's demands. Ragna adds one more condition. Freddy must dissolve our girl and Alfred's engagement because Musee will be his bride. Freddy immediately agrees, declaring the engagement officially dissolved in the king's name. Ragna grins with satisfaction and praises Freddy for being a reasonable man. Alfred protests, asking Freddy if he is really going to obey the evil dragon. Freddy angrily orders him to be quiet, blaming him for creating this entire mess in the first place. Alfred glares back in frustration as Ragna watches silently with Musee in his arms. Ragna looks down at Musee and asks if he can kill Alfred after all, but she immediately refuses. Ragna chuckles and claims he was only joking. Musee smiles at him and points out that he certainly didn't sound like he was joking. Night falls over the estate, marking the end of Ragna's successful negotiations. Musee sleeps peacefully in bed, while Ragna sits beside her under the moonlight, quietly watching over her. He gently strokes her head with a claw and smiles, thinking that she hasn't changed at all. A voice breaks the silence, asking Musee if she really doesn't want revenge. Musee sits beside Ragna in the cave and wonders why she would seek revenge. He points out that she keeps getting killed for no reason, so wanting payback would be perfectly natural. Ragna looks down at her and offers to fulfill her desire if revenge is what she truly wants. Our girl gently smiles and assures him that he has misunderstood. She refuses to seek revenge because she won't lower her own worth over something like that. Ragna accepts her decision and promises to respect it. In that moment, he realizes he has fallen in love with her dignified gaze and unwavering heart. Ragna remembers Musee lying in a pool of blood and regrets not killing the person responsible back then, even if he had to do it by force. He recalls Musee crying and silently vows that if they ever meet again, he will keep his promise to her. As Musee sleeps peacefully, Ragna vows to love her as his wife. The power of the evil dragon now resides deep within Musee, carrying the divine protection she received in her fourth life. Ragna watches over her and swears that even if the entire world stands against him, he will never let Musee's life be taken again. He leans closer and gently touches her, softly confessing his love. Musee stirs awake and discovers a dark-haired man sleeping beside her under the covers. She bolts upright in shock and clutches the blanket around herself, demanding to know who he is. The shirtless man only grumbles sleepily. The man sits up and remarks that Musee is surprisingly energetic this early in the morning. She gasps as realization dawns on her. Musee calls out Ragna's name in disbelief as he calmly stretches and lets out a huge yawn on the bed. Ragna smiles warmly and wishes Musee good morning, telling her she looks as beautiful as ever. Aliciella clutches her face in distress, wondering why everything is going wrong. She fumes, realizing this should be her last chance, and wishing she could use her gift one more time to start over. Aliciella bitterly wonders how different things would be if that woman were not around. 1 week after the negotiations with the king, a gentle hand brushes through long blonde hair. Musee sits nervously before the mirror as Ragna, now in human form, happily brushes her hair. His presence has completely changed her daily life, and her heart races whenever he is near. Everyone avoids the room because no one wants to approach Ragna. Even the maids and Musee's family keep their distance, leaving our girl to handle her own needs. His hand brushes the back of Musee's neck, sending a sudden shiver through her. Embarrassed, Musee turns around and calls out Ragna's name. He playfully apologizes, sticking out his tongue as he jokes that his human form makes it much easier to touch her. Ragna leans closer with a teasing smirk and asks if he should help our girl change her clothes too. Musee turns bright red and insists she can handle it herself. Ragna closes his eyes with a faint smile, admitting that it is a shame. She thinks Ragna is far too touchy-feely, but at least she can dress herself. Unfortunately, the wide opening at the back of her dress makes that much harder than expected. Ragna opens his shirt and looks over when Musee calls his name. From behind the screen, Musee nervously asks if Ragna can fasten the buttons on the back of her dress. Ragna gives her a gentle, affectionate smile. He stands behind Musee and carefully fastens her dress, telling her how well it suits her. His compliment leaves her blushing. Ragna gently lifts a strand of her hair and smiles, telling Musee that she is beautiful. Musee blushes deeply, completely flustered by the way he holds her hair. Musee pouts and complains that Ragna is always complimenting her looks. He simply scratches his head and says it is because she really is beautiful, then suddenly gets an idea. Ragna leans closer and suggests they go out today. Musee turns toward him, surprised by the sudden invitation. With a warm smile, Ragna clarifies that he means they should go on a date. Musee lights up at the thought of her very first date, happily walking beside him through the bustling town. Our girl can barely contain her excitement as they stroll through the lively market. Ragna looks around and remarks that the city seems to be thriving. Musee cheerfully explains that King Freddy is responsible for the city's prosperity. Ragna admits that this is the first time he has seen the city thriving like this, recalling that the last time he woke up, he was fighting a god. Musee nearly freezes in shock when she hears that he once fought a god. Ragna stops at a market stall and curiously asks about the hats on display. Musee giggles at his innocent confusion. With a bright smile, Musee reaches out her hand and calls for him to come with her. Ragna looks at her outstretched hand in surprise before giving her a soft, warm smile. Musee excitedly points toward a fruit stand as she and Ragna walk hand in hand through the cobblestone street. She soon notices that Ragna is attracting plenty of attention from the women around them. A vendor offers Ragna a fresh apple, leaving both of them surprised. Another woman rushes over and offers him a slice of cake from her plate. Soon, a crowd of women surrounds Ragna, eagerly showering him with food and fruit, while Musee watches from a distance. Musee pouts, annoyed and jealous as she grumbles that this date is turning out to be no fun at all. Ragna remains trapped in the middle of the crowd as the excited women continue fawning over him. Musee resigns herself to waiting by a stone wall, figuring this will take a while. Then, a hand suddenly touches the wall beside her. Before she can react, someone grabs her from behind and clamps a hand over her mouth. Ragna notices what happened and turns sharply, his expression darkening with murderous hostility. Ragna reflects that this country is filled with fools. Musee sits tied to a wooden chair, her wrists and body bound tightly with ropes while a blindfold covers her eyes. A voice apologizes before removing the blindfold. Musee opens her eyes and stares in shock as her vision clears. Victor Wachtel, the Prime Minister's son, stands before her. She immediately recognizes the stern man with glasses. Musee remembers her third life, when Victor was Aliciella's closest friend. Victor asks if she knows why he brought her here. Musee quietly says no, prompting him to click his tongue before roughly yanking her hair. He angrily accuses Musee of driving the country insane by summoning the evil dragon, making her wince in pain. Victor rants that the residents have begun turning against the king because they fear the evil dragon's power. Musee calmly meets his glare and asks if he intends to kill her because of it. Victor twirls a strand of her hair with a sinister smirk, declaring that she will take responsibility for throwing the country into chaos. Musee responds with a quiet, unimpressed, She fixes Victor with a knowing look and points out that he is not doing this for the country. Musee reveals that he is actually doing all of this for Aliciella, leaving Victor stunned. Victor crosses his arms with a smirk and admits she is right, revealing that Aliciella ordered him to kill her. Musee lowers her gaze, wondering why Aliciella would want her dead. Musee looks up with disbelief and asks if he is really going to kill her just because Aliciella said so. With a sharp smile, she questions whether her life and death are really up to Aliciella, asking if she thinks she is some kind of god. Victor clicks his tongue as his expression turns cold, a bead of sweat running down his face. Enraged by the insult, Victor slaps Musee across the face and demands to know if she is trying to disrespect Aliciella. He fiercely declares that Aliciella is a saint, so if she says, Musee must die, then she must die. Musee's eyes widen as she realizes what he just said. She turns toward him and asks if he really called Aliciella a saint. Victor panics, sweating as he insists Musee tricked him into saying it. Musee smirks and calmly points out that she only exposed what he was hiding. She quietly processes the word saint, finally understanding why Alfred and the others held Aliciella in such high regard. Musee recalls that saints are young women blessed with mysterious powers, believed to be chosen by God to bring prosperity to the land. Since only one saint can exist at a time, Musee realizes Aliciella must be the country's hidden saint. With a red mark still on her cheek, Musee wonders if she is really expected to die just to protect the saint. Victor coldly confirms her suspicion and tells her to die quietly without resisting. Victor walks across the wooden floor, revealing that he will not kill her himself. Instead, he plans to sell her to bandits or even a trafficker. He smirks, adding that involving a few more people will not make any difference now. Musee shudders as a terrifying realization hits her. Victor has accomplices. Musee finally understands why she was attacked in the royal capital during her third life, despite the city being considered completely safe. She realizes Victor was behind everything that happened. Bound to the wooden chair, Musee suddenly lets out a soft laugh. Victor stares at her in confusion, asking what she finds so funny. Musee keeps smiling, remarking that this outcome might be far less painful than being slaughtered. With a chilling smile, Musee dares Victor to kill her. Her intense gaze makes him visibly shudder. A dark silhouette suddenly appears behind Musee as Ragna emerges from the shadows in his human form. He calmly tells Musee not to be so eager to die. Victor jolts in shock, breaking into a cold sweat at the unexpected voice. Musee turns toward him in surprise and asks when he arrived. Ragna answers with a gentle, reassuring smile. Ragna swiftly cuts through the ropes, freeing Musee from the chair. She looks up and asks how he knew where she was. Ragna leans closer with a soft smile and reminds her that he kissed her neck that morning. Ragna lifts a strand of Musee's hair, revealing a faint mark on the back of her neck. He explains that he marked her, allowing him to find her immediately. Ragna holds Musee close and explains that Victor talked for so long that he decided to wait while erasing his presence. He admits suppressing his bloodlust was difficult, but his words trail off when he notices Musee's face. Ragna suddenly notices the injury near her mouth. Musee casually looks away and says she was slapped. A terrifying aura erupts from Ragna as his eyes narrow with murderous rage. He grins and mutters that humans really are fools. Dark tendrils lash around Victor, binding him tightly before violently slamming him into the floor. Victor crashes down with a heavy thud as Ragna casually lowers his hand, leaving him unconscious. Musee grabs Ragna's arm and tells him to stop, since Victor is already unconscious, insisting that her injury is only a small cut. Ragna looks down hesitantly. Musee grabs his face with both hands and looks straight into his eyes, shouting that this is all his fault. Tears fill Musee's eyes as she blames him for what happened, saying he should have stayed by her side instead of getting surrounded by other women. Ragna droops like a scolded puppy, meekly apologizing for leaving Musee alone. Musee gently holds his arm and reminds him that he promised they were going on a date. She looks up at him sincerely and warns that he cannot let himself get distracted by other women. Her words hit Ragna right in the heart, leaving him blushing intensely as Victor lies unconscious nearby. Musee suggests they continue their date another time. Nearby, a mysterious hooded figure notices her. Ragna gently cups Musee's cheek and nervously asks if she is really all right, unaware that the hooded figure is watching them from behind a stone wall. The figure observes Musee Schnorr, noting that she appears to be an ordinary woman on the surface. A running child suddenly bumps into them. The stranger pulls back the hood, revealing a sharp-featured face, and casually remarks that completing the assigned job is all that matters. Ragna protests in frustration, insisting that he does not want Musee to leave. Musee calmly holds out a folded shirt, patiently dealing with his mood. She pats our boy's head, thinking that he is especially cranky today. School starts tomorrow. Street Belfaria Academy is a prestigious school with a long history, attended mostly by the children of nobles. The academy has 3 departments. The General Education Department is for royalty and nobility. The Knights Department trains students who want to become knights. The Service Department prepares students who seek employment under the nobility. Alfred, Aliciella, Jean, and Victor are all students at St. Belfaria Academy. Ragna frantically argues that Musee does not need to go to school. He worries that it will take away their time together and leave her vulnerable to those people who tried to kill her. Musee nervously explains that she does not want people to think she is running away from Alfred and the others. She also believes school will teach her how to behave like a refined lady. Musee grips the bedsheets tightly, wondering if she has finally gone mad. She admits to herself that dying is terrifying, yet she cannot help wondering if this path will end any better. With a gentle smile, Musee tells Ragna that whenever she makes him sad, she starts feeling like she would not mind dying again. Ragna's expression turns pained as he quietly asks her not to say things like that. Her countless deaths have left a deep contradiction inside her, torn between the desire to live and a quiet acceptance of death. As long as Ragna stays by her side, Musee feels she can keep smiling until the very end. She sees these conflicting feelings as proof that something inside her has broken. Ragna relaxes on the bed and asks why those people are after her, wondering if she knows anything about it. Our girl remembers how, in her first 4 lives, she constantly warned Aliciella to stay away from Alfred because he was her fiancé. Ragna admits that it made sense since they were engaged, but his tone suddenly changes as he calls out to Musee. He leans in close and angrily orders our girl never to say another man's name when he is around, making his jealousy crystal clear. Musee blinks in surprise as Ragna grumbles right beside her. A soft blush spreads across her face as she asks if he is jealous. Ragna turns away, his face burning with embarrassment as sweat trickles down his cheek. Our girl places a hand over her racing heart and points out that he really likes her. Ragna covers his mouth, then shyly admits that she is right. He gently cups her cheek and confesses that he is drawn to everything about her, from her appearance and personality to her very soul. Ragna assures our girl that even if she believes she is broken, he does not care. All that matters is having her by his side. He gently holds her cheek and asks her never to say that she would not mind dying again, while our girl answers with a warm smile. Ragna grins mischievously, saying he would rather hear her admit that she is so happy spending time with him that she could die. Ragna gets out of bed with a focused expression, leaving Musee to wonder what he is planning. He turns to Musee with a bright smile and cheerfully announces that he is going to pay the king a little visit. Ragna transforms into a dragon and takes off into the sky, leaving Musee gasping in disbelief as she calls after him. Musee sits on the edge of the bed, wondering what he meant by those words as a growing sense of dread takes hold. The new school term begins, and Musee heads for the waiting carriage in her neatly pressed uniform, bidding Ragna farewell before leaving for school. Ragna beams with delight as he points out the ribbon he bought on his way back from the castle. He says it looks perfect on Musee, especially since it matches his black hair. Musee sweat drops at his unusually cheerful mood, wondering what he could have done at the castle to put him in such high spirits. She points out that her ribbon matches her silver hair and tells him that it looks good on him too. Ragna gives her a warm smile from the estate gates and wishes her a good day as the carriage pulls away. Inside the moving carriage, Musee watches the scenery with concern, convinced Ragna is up to something and hoping she is just overthinking it. Students make their way toward the imposing main building of Street Belferia Academy as the new term begins. Musee steps onto the cobblestone path, ignoring the curious glances from students gathered near the gates. The students whisper among themselves, pointing out Lady Musee and discussing how the king ordered the cancellation of her engagement. One student coldly remarks that Musee was simply discarded. Musee expected this kind of reaction, but she realizes the rumors have already been twisted beyond recognition. The gossip gets worse as students claim Musee became unstable out of jealousy toward Aliciella, forcing Alfred to appeal directly to the king. She knows none of it is true. Others speculate that she was unfaithful or had already given herself to someone else. Musee silently walks past them, furious at how completely wrong they are. Musee suddenly stops when two familiar figures approach. Reed walks ahead while Carlos follows behind, leaving her frozen in surprise. The man before her is Reed von Noviesta, the crown prince and the king's eldest son. Reed greets Musee with a smooth good morning, catching her slightly off guard. Musee gives a polite curtsy and respectfully greets His Highness. She recalls meeting Reed several times while accompanying Alfred, finding it hard to believe that the crown prince actually remembers her. Reed comments on the commotion surrounding her lately, and Musee calmly acknowledges it. With a warm smile, Reed brings up the rumors claiming that Alfred simply discarded her. Musee calmly explains that the engagement was officially cancelled under the king's name, adding that she assumed His Highness already knew. Reed gives a sly chuckle, touching his chin as he questions whether that is really the case. A strange unease runs through Musee as Reed calls her name with a dark smirk. Reed suddenly asks if it is true that Musee summoned the evil dragon, leaving her horrified. The surrounding students erupt in disbelief, questioning whether Lady Musee really summoned the evil dragon as she stands frozen in shock. Musee clenches her fist as sweat trickles down her hand, realizing Reed deliberately exposed her in front of the entire crowd. Carlos frantically calls out to His Highness, clearly alarmed by what he just said. Carlos anxiously asks Reed if he is really trying to ruin Lady Musee's reputation based on nothing but rumors. Reed calmly asks why Carlos is so upset, explaining that since they are only rumors, he simply asked Musee to clear them up herself. Musee recognizes the man as His Highness's servant, Carlos Flit. Reed smirks, insisting that it is perfectly reasonable to ask whether she summoned the dragon directly from the person involved. Musee can only glare at him in silence. Musee faces forward with a firm expression and clearly denies summoning the evil dragon. She admits to herself that she did ask for his help, but that hardly means she summoned him. The whole argument feels ridiculously petty. Musee firmly points out that bringing this up in front of a crowd will make everyone doubt her and treat her like a traitor. Reed gives her a cold smile, warning that if she really did summon the evil dragon, she would indeed be branded a traitor. Musee glares back with fierce determination, arguing that if she had truly summoned the evil dragon, the entire country would have been reduced to ruins the moment he appeared. The tension between them grows as Musee and Reed lock eyes in a fierce standoff. Reed scoffs and turns away, saying they will be late for class before calling Carlos to follow. Carlos bows and respectfully agrees. A smug smile crosses Reed's face as he glances back and casually tells Musee to excuse him. Carlos gives Musee a polite bow before following Reed inside. She lets out a weary sigh, already wishing she could go home. The classroom fills with students as a teacher takes her place at the podium. The teacher welcomes everyone back from break and announces that a new student will be joining the class. She calls for the new student to come in, leaving Musee surprised since transfer students are so rare. Musee's eyes widened in complete shock. Ragna walks into the classroom wearing thick spiral glasses and a loose school uniform, cheerfully introducing himself as Ragna Dragnica. The teacher tells Ragna to choose any seat he likes, while Musee stares at him in disbelief, wondering what kind of ridiculous disguise he is wearing. Ragna strolls down the aisle and settles beside Musee, making her realize that his visit to the king must have been connected to this sudden transfer. He looks down at her through his swirly glasses and cheerfully greets her as though they have never met. Musee turns away with an annoyed pout, frustrated that he never mentioned coming to school and is now pretending to be a stranger. Ragna leans close and whispers that she is cute, leaving Musee completely frozen. Musee fumes with rage, her frustration reaching its limit. She wonders why he is acting like this in the first place. Two male students suddenly rush over and grab Ragna, asking if they can speak with him. Musee watches in surprise. They drag Ragna away, warning him to stop sitting beside Musee because His Highness claims she summoned the evil dragon. Ragna looks confused, while Musee silently thinks that they are lecturing the evil dragon himself. Musee lowers her gaze, hurt by how Ragna is treating her like a stranger, even if she understands why he has to do it. Musee slams a hand against the desk before turning and walking out through the classroom doors. Aliciella suddenly bumps into Musee outside, leaving both girls startled. Aliciella quickly regains her composure and greets Lady Musee with a sweet smile. Musee recognizes Aliciella Machillis, her heart pounding as she wonders why she is here when they belong to different classes. Musee clenches her trembling fist as Aliciella notices her sudden agitation. A sly snicker escapes Aliciella behind her hand before she instantly replaces it with an innocent expression. Aliciella grabs Ragna's arm with a bright, blushing smile and happily calls out to Lord Ragna. Musee stares in shock from the doorway, unable to believe what she is seeing. Aliciella excitedly mentions hearing about Ragna's transfer and suggests they have lunch together. Musee watches in growing panic, wondering why Aliciella is already clinging to him and if history is about to repeat itself. A painful memory flashes through Musee's mind as she recalls Aliciella happily holding hands with Alfred. She fears Aliciella is about to steal someone else from her all over again. Musee's painful memory twists into a new nightmare as Aliciella holds Ragna's hand instead. She stands frozen, tears welling up in her wide eyes. Musee suddenly runs away as Ragna turns toward the doorway and calls her name, while Aliciella keeps hold of his arm and cheerfully calls him Lord Ragna. Aliciella watches her leave with a smug smile and asks where she is going, while Ragna clicks his tongue in annoyance. Musee races down the dark hallway, desperately telling herself that she refuses to see any more of this. She nearly crashes into Alfred and quickly bows her head before rushing past him, leaving him to watch her disappear. Musee realizes that having Ragna by her side was all she ever needed. Aliciella gives Ragna a soft, blushing smile, but he responds with a serious look. Musee collapses onto the stone ground outside, her hair falling over her back as she wonders through her tears why this is happening. The day before school starts, the scene shifts to the castle. The king takes a short break before entering the room, only to gasp when he sees who is inside. Ragna sits by the window with an open book and slyly tells the king he is late. The king demands to know who he is. Ragna casually introduces himself as the evil dragon. The king stares in disbelief. Ragna calmly says he has something to discuss with him. Ragna reveals that Victor tried to kill Musee by selling her to a human trafficker. He then asks if the king received an official report about the incident. The king explains that Victor was found with several broken ribs in an abandoned building, and the report blamed the evil dragon and Musee Schnorr. The king cannot believe Victor would do such a thing. Ragna clicks his tongue, annoyed that he went easy on Victor, and doubts the king's explanation. A gag order was placed on everything involving the evil dragon and his relationship with Musee. Since Ragna had requested permission to live with our girl in the country, their negotiations were kept as a state secret. Ragna points out that Victor, the prime minister's son, knew everything about them. He adds that everyone targeted after Musee admired the hidden saint, Aliciella Machillis. The king gasps in shock, admitting he never knew Aliciella was a saint. Ragna listens quietly, his sharp gaze fixed on the king. He suspects someone is pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Whoever is behind it has been targeting Musee for some reason, and even monitoring her movements. Tomorrow, our girl will start school, where both her attackers and the so-called saint will be waiting. Ragna firmly declares that he wants to attend the academy as well. The king agrees, suggesting they handle the matter in secret. Ragna smiles confidently, pleased that they reached an agreement so quickly. He promises to report back once he uncovers more. The king gives the evil dragon his full trust. The Grand Academy stands beneath the open sky. Thanks to the king, Ragna managed to enroll without any trouble. Behind his glasses, he smirks as he recalls how treating Musee like a stranger kept her at a distance while giving him the satisfaction of seeing her angry. Musee lowers her gaze, lost in thought. A delighted smile crosses Ragna's face as his thoughts turn to Musee. He reflects on the strange but irresistible feeling of having a deep connection with our girl, wondering how she must be feeling about it. Ragna quickly adjusts to his new surroundings, amazed that he ended up here right after such an intense experience. Aliciella closes her eyes with a sweet smile as she clings to Ragna's arm. Ragna shoots Aliciella a furious glare from behind his glasses. He points out that this is their first meeting, but Aliciella simply giggles and says it does not matter. Aliciella squeezes Ragna's arm and quietly reveals that she already knows who he is. With a bright smile, she asks if they should have lunch together. Ragnar narrows his eyes, growing even more suspicious of her. Alfred calls out to Aliciella from the doorway, making her pause. Alfred nervously repeats her name as she casually acknowledges him. Aliciella turns toward Alfred without letting go of Ragnar's arm. She smiles confidently and tells Alfred not to worry, reminding him who she is. Aliciella assures him that getting along with Ragnar will be easy because she finds him cute. Alfred smiles warmly, saying he trusts her judgment. Behind his glasses, Ragnar watches them with a sharp, calculating smirk. Aliciella smiles serenely, realizing she finally understands what Musee has been doing after seeing it for herself. Ragnar pulls his hand away and rejects her offer, warning that there is already someone he likes and he does not want Musee to misunderstand him. Aliciella brightly asks if he means Lady Musee, pointing out that Musee ran out of the classroom after seeing them together. She innocently claims Musee would want them to get along, making Ragnar's eyebrow twitch with annoyance. Aliciella cheerfully adds that Ragnar will eventually like her more than Musee. Ragnar finally loses his patience and harshly tells her to shut up. Aliciella gasps as he shoves her hand away, unleashing a terrifying dark aura. Students passing by recoil in shock as the dark mist pours from the room, making them gag from the overwhelming pressure. Ragnar's eyes glow like a reptile behind his glasses as he calls her a foolish woman and declares that he is nobody's puppet. Aliciella covers her mouth in horror while Alfred trembles beside her, surrounded by Ragnar's swirling shadows. Aliciella lowers her hand and suddenly bursts into unsettling laughter. She finds the situation incredible, claiming that despite a few unexpected twists, everything is unfolding exactly as she predicted. Ragnar narrows his eyes behind his glasses, fixating on one word: scenario. Aliciella reaches toward him with a sly smile, assuring him that everything is fine because she will always stay by his side. Ragnar's eyes glow fiercely as a heavy wave of dark aura sweeps through the room. The force suddenly sends Aliciella crashing into the wall. Ragnar storms out of the room, clutching his head, while Alfred rushes to Aliciella's side. He covers his mouth in frustration, desperate to see Musee and wondering if he is finally losing his mind. Outside, Musee sits alone beside the courtyard fountain as students pass by. Tears well up in our girl's eyes as she admits she could not stand seeing Aliciella touch Ragnar. Musee realizes this pain feels nothing like what she experienced with Alfred. For the first time, she understands how painful love can be. As our girl wipes away her tears, footsteps approach and a voice asks what she is doing. A group of male students gathers in the courtyard, staring toward Musee. Yuri stands at the front, fixing her with a stern gaze. Musee looks up in surprise and softly calls out to Yuri Schnorr. She recognizes him as the youngest of the 4 Schnorr siblings and her little brother. Yuri turns away and coldly tells her not to say his name. He angrily scolds Musee for crying in public, calling her a disgrace to the Earls before insulting her. Musee grips the fountain's stone edge and stares at him in disbelief, asking if he really just called her that. Yuri cheerfully doubles down, saying that no matter what the king ordered, bringing another man into her home makes her exactly that. Something inside Musee snaps as her tear-filled eye freezes in shock. The other students mock her, laughing as they ask if she has been bringing men home and suggest she play with them too. Tears stream down our girl's face as she wonders why one horrible thing after another keeps happening to her. She feels herself breaking apart, unable to endure any more pain. Musee forces a strained smile and lets out a hollow laugh. The 3 boys fall silent, their faces flushing as they are caught off guard by her unexpected reaction. She keeps laughing through her tears, sarcastically asking if she must be hurting them that badly. Musee admits that if she were not hurting, she would never have come close to being killed. More than anything, she hates this pain. Overwhelmed by despair, Musee cries that she wants to die, but Ragnar suddenly shouts from across the courtyard, reminding her that he told her never to say that. Ragnar stands beneath the arched walkway, staring across the courtyard at our girl. Ragnar leans against the stone pillar, watching Musee with a tense expression. He takes a step forward and softly calls her name, assuring her that he is right there. Musee suddenly yells at him to stay away, leaving Ragnar stunned. Tears stream down her face as she refuses to let herself be touched by a man who has been touched by another woman. Furious and heartbroken, Musee reminds him that they are supposed to be complete strangers anyway, leaving him speechless. With tears in her eyes, she admits that she hates unkind people. Snowflakes suddenly drift across the courtyard, leaving the students staring at the sky in confusion. A violent blizzard erupts as Ragnar pushes through the heavy snow toward Musee. Yuri shivers from the sudden cold, completely baffled by the unexpected blizzard. Ragnar reaches toward Musee, anxiously calling her name and begging her to let him explain. Musee firmly warns Ragnar not to address her so casually, when they are supposed to be complete strangers. Tears well up behind Ragna's glasses as he begs her to wait. He insists he is serious, apologizing as he admits that his heart is breaking and he cannot bear the thought of her hating him. Ragna clasps his hands and tearfully apologizes again, while Musee remains silent. Musee softens, realizing there must be a reason he was treating her like a stranger. She admits that she hates being treated that way, making Ragna anxiously call her name. Blushing through her tears, Musee finally confesses that she hates seeing another woman touch Ragna when he is supposed to be hers. Musee stares in surprise as Ragna covers his mouth, struggling to contain his laughter. Flustered, she asks why he is laughing so much. A deep blush spreads across Ragna's face as he asks if her confession was basically a declaration of love. Musee freezes in shock as her face turns bright red, suddenly realizing what she just admitted. Ragna spreads his arms with a huge smile, overjoyed that Musee called him hers. He happily declares that he loves her. Musee holds up her hand and firmly refuses to let him touch her after another woman touched him, leaving Ragna in distress. Ragna asks if washing himself with cold water would fix it. Musee hesitates before reluctantly agreeing. He immediately climbs onto the fountain and steps straight into the spraying water, leaving Musee completely stunned. Ragna stands drenched beneath the fountain, removes his glasses, and gives Musee a calm, handsome look. He tosses aside his glasses and shirt as he steps out of the fountain, proudly announcing that he is clean. Ragna pulls Musee into a warm embrace and sincerely apologizes. He explains that he had plans to protect her reputation, but promises never to treat her like a stranger again if it hurts her this much. Musee rests against his chest, her eyes widening as she begins to wonder what was really going on. Ragna gently holds the back of her head and firmly assures her that he could never fall for that woman. Over Musee's shoulder, Ragna glares coldly as he recalls Aliciella saying she would take her place at his side. He pulls Musee closer, furious that Aliciella spoke as if replacing her was perfectly normal. To him, nobody could ever take her place. His eyes darken as he admits he actually thought he was losing his mind. Ragna gently cradles Musee's face and kisses her, confessing that he cannot imagine a future without her. He lifts her chin and gazes into her eyes, softly calling her name. Musee suddenly notices the three boys collapsed nearby, barely conscious. Ragna complains that she ignored his kiss, but she snaps back that this is hardly the time for that. Ragna sighs and decides to heal them. He channels magic through his glowing hand while keeping Musee close. A sardonic smile crosses his face as he explains that healing magic is not his specialty, but it works surprisingly well when he thinks about Musee, making her blush. The boys slowly sit up, confused by what happened. Despite being caught in a blizzard, they now feel as warm as spring. Yuri looks up in surprise as Musee kneels beside him, still held close by Ragna, and asks where it hurts. Tears fill Yuri's eyes before he suddenly lunges at Musee, hugging her tightly and desperately apologizing for what he said. The other students stare at each other in disbelief, horrified by the cruel things they said to Lady Musee and unable to understand why they acted that way. Musee can only stare in confusion as Yuri continues sobbing beside her. Ragna gives a knowing smile, admitting that her confusion is understandable. Ragna narrows his eyes with a sharp smirk and reveals the truth. Everyone had been brainwashed. Deep inside the castle lies a special room that only the king can enter. With nothing but a bookshelf, a chair, and a table, it serves as his private sanctuary. Freddy is stunned when Musee cheerfully wishes him good morning, while Ragna clings to her from behind like he never plans to let go. Freddy cannot understand how Musee managed to tame the evil dragon so peacefully. He asks her what she did to him, leaving our girl completely speechless. Ragna squeezes Musee tighter and says he is simply replenishing his Musee energy. She relays his words to Freddy, who can only awkwardly accept the explanation. Musee explains that school has been cancelled because of the abnormal weather from a few days ago. The sudden blizzard was actually Ragna's doing, but the students have still been ordered to stay home. Her earlier words about hating unkind people clearly struck Ragna harder than expected. Since then, he refuses to leave Musee's side, clinging to her even in their private room. Ragna gently reminds Musee to call him Ragna while he is in human form. If people recognize him as the evil dragon, he will never be able to move around freely. Freddy is stunned by this level of sincerity. Letting Musee call him by his true name proves just how much Ragna trusts her, though Freddy can only huff in disbelief. Ragna suddenly gets serious and says they should cut to the chase. After infiltrating the academy, he discovered what was really happening there, including the truth about the hidden saint, Aliciella Machilus. Aliciella has completely taken control of the school. Musee and Freddy are both stunned by the revelation. Musee asks if Aliciella really has enough influence to control the entire academy. Ragna clarifies that she did not achieve this through social influence. Instead, Aliciella used her magic and skills to brainwash the entire school. Freddy is completely baffled. Humans cannot use magic, so he demands to know what Ragna means by skills. Ragna adjusts his glasses and explains that he first needs to cover what skills and saints actually are. Meanwhile, Musee quietly finds his choice of eyewear amusing. According to Ragna's notes, skills are special talents granted by God, such as extraordinary intelligence or charisma, that help advance the world and allow their users to achieve remarkable feats. Saints possess several unique skills, including fertility, healing, and seduction. Freddy wonders if Aliciella used her seduction skill to brainwash the students. Ragna explains that while a saint's skills are powerful, seduction alone could never cause such an extreme effect. Ragna narrows his reptilian eye and reveals the real reason: Aliciella is using magic. The human brain cannot properly process magic. It simply overloads, making humans incapable of using it. However, extremely rare irregularities can create a glitch in God's grand design. And Aliciella happens to be one of those glitches. Freddy asks if this glitch is what allowed Aliciella to use magic and take over the academy. Ragna agrees, then adds that she also received an unusually terrible divine gift. Musee asks what he means by a divine gift. Ragna explains that Aliciella received a small fragment of another divine power, separate from ordinary magic. He does not know exactly what her gift is, but the possibilities are limited. Aliciella's claim that everything happened according to her predictions, combined with Musee's 5 previous lives, gives Ragna enough clues to connect the dots. Ragna reaches a chilling conclusion. Aliciella's power is either precognition or the ability to travel through time. Freddy is horrified by the idea. He cannot understand why Aliciella would stop at one school when she could use such a powerful ability to conquer the entire country. Ragna explains that divine power comes with a serious limitation. Human vessels deteriorate when they use it, meaning these abilities can only be used a limited number of times. The human body also limits how much magic and divine power Aliciella can wield. Even with her seduction skill, spreading her magic across the entire academy was already pushing her limits. That is why Aliciella surrounded herself with charismatic pawns and influential students, using them to strengthen her control over the academy. However, Alfred, Jean, and Victor received a much stronger form of brainwashing because they were the ones who targeted Musee. Musee's eyes widen as she processes the revelation about the 3 men who once targeted her. Ragna points out that Alfred, Jean, and Victor are only the 3 they know about. There could easily be more victims. Fortunately, Aliciella's normal brainwashing can be broken by a powerful shock. Ragna's blizzard had already snapped several students back to their senses. Since Aliciella's abilities come from a glitch in the system, her magic cannot be detected unless someone actually witnesses her using it. The same applies to anyone she has brainwashed, making them just as impossible to detect. Ragna explains that physical contact is another exception. If someone touches Aliciella while she casts her magic, they can detect it. Musee looks confused as Ragna rests against her shoulder, his expression turning serious. He points out that Aliciella's body and mind are both fundamentally different. Musee asks what he means. Ragna explains that Aliciella's mind is a chaotic mess, possibly because of her repeated use of divine power, making her difficult even for him to understand. In the simplest terms, Ragna says her mind is disgusting. Musee shudders as she realizes Aliciella gave her the exact same feeling. That unsettling presence was the source of the fear she could never explain. Freddy asks what countermeasures Ragna has planned. Ragna simply smiles while keeping Musee close. Then he cheerfully admits that he has absolutely no plan. Freddy is left completely speechless as Ragna happily repeats that he has not thought of anything. Ragna turns serious again. They know Aliciella is using brainwashing magic, but they still have no idea what she actually wants. Ragna still cannot figure out why Aliciella is brainwashing people or why she keeps targeting Musee. Freddy solemnly agrees. There is no question that Musee is her target. Ragna refuses to act until he understands Aliciella's true objective. But he will not forgive her for targeting Musee, and if she tries again, he will strike back. For now, protecting Musee comes first. Ragna suggests finding an ally who can help them deal with Aliciella. Ideally, they need someone with a powerful skill who is completely immune to her brainwashing before making their move. Ragna cheerfully tells Freddy to stay out of it and be a good little king. Once the time comes to act, he will have plenty of work to do. Freddy sighs and asks if Ragna sees him as just another pawn. Ragna cheerfully admits that he does. Later, Ragna serves tea while Musee asks if he can also detect people's skills. He casually confirms that he can because he is the evil dragon. Musee asks if Aliciella's brainwashing can affect him. Ragna confidently assures her that human brainwashing magic could never work on him. Ragna sets his teacup down and brings up Aliciella again. His expression darkens as he reveals the horrifying truth. Aliciella used the worst kind of magic, forcing him to love her and hate Musee enough to kill her. Musee thanks him for the tea and jokes that there is almost nothing he cannot do. Ragna quickly disagrees, insisting there is at least one thing he cannot do. He leans over her and gently cups her head, admitting that he could not hold her in his arms the moment he wanted to. Musee stares up at him in surprise, completely caught off guard. Ragna then smirks and admits there is another thing he cannot do, simply kidnap Musee and lock her away somewhere where only the two of them can stay. His words leave our girl bright red. Musee looks away shyly and assures him that she has no intention of running away. Ragna smiles, saying he already figured that. Still, he admits he could never stand the thought of Musee loving another man more than him. With a possessive smirk, Ragna warns her to remember that he would have no problem locking her away if necessary. Musee squeaks in embarrassment as he leans closer and gently holds her face. Ragna points out a disturbing pattern in Musee's memories. In all 4 previous lives, her engagement was broken off shortly before she was killed, and both events happened at nearly the same time. A memory shows Musee at the Academy's annual dance, where she broke off her engagement herself in this life. Musee covers her mouth in horror as the memories fall into place. Every previous murder happened after her engagement was cancelled, around the time she was supposed to graduate. Ragna realizes Aliciella must have a specific reason for needing Musee dead at that exact point. He drops a sugar cube into his tea and explains that if they can survive past that critical period, they may be able to stop Aliciella's plan. That means Musee only has to survive for about 3 more months. Ragna gives her a confident smirk. If she makes it past those 3 months, they win this battle. Musee stares at him as the significance of his plan finally sinks in. Outside the academy, Jean Bista turns around after someone calls his full name. A student with a notebook asks Jean how his training as a guard for Duke Remblu's household is going. The teacher pats Jean on the shoulder and asks if he is taking his guard training seriously. Jean calmly assures him that he is. Then a nearby student points out that Lady Musee is right there, causing Jean to freeze. Jean nervously apologizes and quickly excuses himself, leaving the teacher completely confused. He rushes down the hallway, determined to stay away from Musee. Something about being near her makes him feel like he is losing control again. Suddenly, dizziness overwhelms Jean as his vision twists and blurs. He drops to his knees against the wall, clutching his face as he remembers the terrifying feeling of someone else controlling his body. Jean forces himself back up and remembers his upbringing as a knight. His family had served the nation for generations, and their pride had been instilled in him since childhood. A memory shows his father teaching him to raise his sword not to kill, but to protect and help others live. Young Jean trains with a wooden sword under his father's watchful eye, carrying that knightly pride deep within his heart. But the memories shatter as Jean sees himself drawing his blade against a defenseless Musee, forced to confront the horrifying act he was driven to commit. Jean shudders in terror as the truth of what he did finally sinks in. He presses his head against the wall, unable to believe he once raised his sword against a woman. Jean realizes that whenever he gets near Musee, he starts to lose his mind. His thoughts become hazy, as if some unseen force is taking control of him. An unbearable urge once commanded him to grab his sword and tear Musee apart. Jean desperately wants to apologize, but he knows he will only hurt her again if they meet. Avoiding her is the only way he can protect her. He turns away in despair, disgusted by the feeling of his own mind and body refusing to obey him. Jean clutches his head and silently begs for someone to save him. A sharp clack echoes through the corridor. Jean looks up in surprise as someone steps into his path. Ragna stands in the archway, dressed in his school uniform and glasses, calmly looking down at Jean. Ragna casually greets Jean, who can barely stay upright. Jean wonders if he has come for revenge. Jean reaches out with a trembling hand and begs Ragna to punish him however he sees fit. Tears fill Jean's eyes as he begs Ragna to free him from whatever is controlling his mind and body. Overwhelmed, Jean collapses onto the stone floor and lies motionless before him. When classes resume, Jean sits at his desk and keeps staring at Musee, making her sweat uncomfortably. With school back in session, Ragna drops his dense act and casually sits beside Musee, instantly standing out among the other students. Classes barely progress because the teacher is completely captivated by Ragna. Even better, his overwhelming presence seems to break Aliciella's brainwashing, as another student suddenly regains his senses. At noon, Musee points out how bored Ragna looked during class. He immediately asks where they should have lunch. A A student suddenly bursts through the classroom doors with shocking news from the morning's sword-fighting class. He nervously tells Ragna and Musee that Crown Prince Reed raised his sword against his own servant, Carlos. He urgently reports that during morning sword training, Crown Prince Reed raised his blade against his own servant, Carlos. Musee recalls that both general education and service students attend the same sword training sessions. The male students train with swords for emergencies, while the female students stay in class to practice needlework. Another student asks why Reed would attack Carlos, so he explains what the other students witnessed. Aliciella had slipped away from her class and wandered into the sword training grounds, where the students were practicing. Carlos spots Aliciella peeking through the door, while she innocently watches the training inside. Suddenly, a practice sword flies straight toward her. Carlos quickly steps in and blocks the blade with his own sword, then demands to know why she came here when women aren't supposed to be in the training area. Aliciella thanks him with teary eyes, but her words leave Carlos grimacing as an unpleasant sensation suddenly hits him. Carlos recoils in disgust and clutches his face as Aliciella watches in silence. Reed glares at him from across the training floor. Reed raises his sword and demands to know how Carlos dares call Aliciella disgusting. Carlos flinches as the prince confronts him. Carlos reacts instantly, kicking Reed hard in the abdomen to defend himself. Reed crashes to the ground in pain as the surrounding students shout in shock. Carlos regrets forgetting to hold back his strength. The student explains that Reed was taken to the guest hall lounge, while Carlos was sent to the medical office. Meanwhile, Ragna grins slyly at the report. Ragna realizes they have found the perfect pawn without having to lift a finger. He explains to Musee that Carlos felt nauseous just from looking at Aliciella, proving he naturally resists her magic. Ragna adds that Carlos's brain fought against the brainwashing, causing his body to react with physical discomfort. With their target identified, Ragna decides to visit Carlos at the medical office immediately. Ragna throws open the medical office doors and loudly asks the startled staff member if Carlos is there, with Musee following behind him. Musee scolds Ragna for shouting, but the nurse quickly orders them out. Ragna ignores her and pulls back a curtain, finding Carlos inside. Musee notices how pale Carlos looks as he lies on the medical bed. Ragna agrees as they stand beside him. Carlos breathes heavily as a faint glow surrounds him. His eyes slowly open as he regains consciousness. Carlos rubs his head and asks where he is. Musee greets him with a polite smile and wishes him a good morning. He suddenly sits up after seeing Lady Musee, then freezes when he notices the unfamiliar man beside her. Carlos asks who he is, so Ragna calmly introduces himself as the evil dragon Ragna and points out that this is their first meeting. Carlos looks away nervously, sweat running down his cheek as he quietly mutters that he knew it. Musee wonders how Carlos already knows about Ragna and where he could have heard about him. Ragna smirks and cuts straight to the point, asking if Carlos has been secretly watching them. Carlos clicks his tongue and darkens his expression, while Musee gasps at Ragna's sudden accusation. Ragna reminds Carlos that he was there when Musee was abducted by the Prime Minister's son. He then reveals that Crown Prince Reed was the one who ordered Carlos to keep watch on them. Ragna asks if Carlos's master has been acting strangely ever since meeting Aliciella. Carlos stares at him in shock, sweating as the implication sinks in. Musee grows anxious, wondering if Carlos even realizes that the woman Ragna means is Lady Aliciella. Ragna suspects that Reed may have fallen under Aliciella's brainwashing as well. Carlos gasps, asking if Master Reed has truly been brainwashed. Musee immediately realizes that it must be true. Reed somehow knew about the top-secret existence of the evil dragon, which would explain everything if Aliciella had brainwashed him. Musee steps closer and asks Carlos if she can ask him something. He hesitantly agrees. Our girl looks at him earnestly and asks why Aliciella is trying to kill her. Carlos stays silent, gripping the bedsheet tightly as Musee's question leaves him visibly shaken. Tears well up in Carlos's eyes as he struggles to answer Musee's question. Carlos recalls his childhood when he belonged to a secretive group that few people even knew existed. Young Carlos grips a small blade as he remembers his past. It was a brutal world of assassinations and black market dealings, where bloodshed was simply answered with more bloodshed. One day, Carlos failed an assassination attempt and was captured. Young Carlos sits bound with ropes as guards surround him with spears. An older official orders them to dispose of the captured assassin. Suddenly, a young voice rings out, ordering the guards to stop. Young Reed steps forward and points out that the captured assassin is the same age as him. Reed places a hand over his chest and begs the official to let him personally retrain the young assassin. He pleads for Carlos's life, leaving the young boy staring at him in stunned disbelief. Carlos reflects on the irony that the person who saved his life was the very person he had been sent to kill. Carlos remembers Reed as a noble man who seemed destined to become a great king. He was kind-hearted and deeply respected the value of human life. But everything changed during their third year at the academy when Reed met a new student. That student was none other than Aliciella Michaelis. Aliciella was born to a gardener and a viscount's daughter who had eloped. After her parents died in an accident, her viscount grandfather took her in despite having no other family. She quickly fit in at the academy, and before long, everyone treated her like a princess. No matter what Aliciella said, the students always agreed with her and eagerly carried out her wishes. Even the proud viscounts happily did her bidding, while Carlos watched the strange behavior from a distance. Yet while everyone else seemed enchanted by her, being near Aliciella only made Carlos feel deeply uncomfortable. Among her most devoted followers were Lord Victor, Lord Jean, and Lord Alfred, who followed her around like loyal servants. The fourth person completely devoted to Aliciella was Crown Prince Reed himself. To Carlos, Aliciella was a poisonous flower who drove men mad, with her admirers constantly showering her with roses and obeying her every whim. Carlos grips his shoulder as he remembers the day that poisonous woman approached him directly. Aliciella leaned close and mockingly told him he would be devastated when Reed eventually ordered him to kill again. She then flashed an unsettling smile and promised Carlos that she would always remain by his side. Carlos shudders at the memory, her words still haunting him. He cannot believe Reed would ever give such a cruel order. After all, the prince was the one who saved him and freed him from his life of darkness. In the past, Reed cheerfully sipped tea as he ordered Carlos to keep watch over Lady Musee and her companion. He even gave Carlos permission to use his old assassin skills, warning that he might have to kill them if necessary. Carlos was stunned by the order and asked if Reed was doing this because Lady Aliciella wanted it. Reed cheerfully dismisses the idea, insisting that Aliciella is a saint who would never ask him to kill anyone. With a gentle, almost love-struck smile, Reed insists that he is acting entirely of his own free will. Carlos realizes that Reed's smile looks like that of a man completely in love. In the end, Aliciella's prediction came true. She had destroyed the very qualities that once made Reed fit to be king. Back in the medical office, Carlos sincerely apologizes to Musee and Ragna for spying on them, explaining that he was only following orders. Tears stream down his face as he admits that all he wants is a respectable life, far away from the painful memories of his past. Carlos lowers his head, admitting that these are only excuses because he could have ended up killing Musee. She listens quietly. Musee gives him a gentle look and forgives him for telling them the truth. Then it clicks for our girl. The mysterious figure who killed her in her first life was Carlos, acting on Reed's orders. Ragna leans closer and demands that Carlos reveal what Aliciella did throughout Musee's 4 previous lives. Carlos freezes at Ragna's question, clearly caught off guard. He grabs his head in disbelief, wondering if the entire school has been brainwashed and whether something like that is even possible. Ragna presses him for answers, asking how much he truly knows about Aliciella. Carlos explains that Reed called her a hidden saint and claims she possessed an ability similar to precognition. Ragna recalls his own encounter with Aliciella when she spoke as though events were unfolding exactly as she had predicted. At first, Ragna assumed she had the power of precognition. But after hearing Carlos's story and considering Musee's past, he begins to suspect something far more complicated. Ragna now believes Aliciella used some kind of time travel ability to begin this 5th life. Carlos asks why he thinks it is time travel instead of precognition. Ragna explains that precognition should only reveal information about the person using it. So if Aliciella knew Carlos's future, the simplest explanation was that she had already lived through it in an earlier timeline. Musee listens carefully as Ragna explains that, despite having no magical abilities, she regained memories of her 4 previous lives to counter Aliciella's impossible actions. Ragna explains that time travel must have a specific trigger. In this case, he believes Musee's death is what sends Aliciella back in time. In other words, Musee dying is the condition that allows Aliciella to reset the timeline. Musee sweat drops and wonders why her death would be the trigger. Ragna has no clear answer yet. The mystery only gets deeper. Aliciella is behind Musee's deaths, but Ragna still cannot explain how she knew time travel was possible in the first place, or why she is so obsessed with killing her. Carlos chuckles awkwardly, admitting there is still a huge amount they don't know. Musee notices that his speech has suddenly become much more casual. Ragna casually confirms that his full name is Carlos Flit, and Carlos calmly agrees. Carlos is caught off guard when Ragna suddenly offers him a chance to help them. Ragna points out that Carlos can resist Aliciella's brainwashing. If they play their cards right, Musee can survive, and Reed can finally break free from her influence. Carlos hesitates, reminding them that he is Reed's servant and could never betray his master. Musee calmly tells him that she does not care whether he helps them. She does not want to die, of course, but if it happens, then so be it. Ragna sighs and reminds Musee not to talk like that. He only wanted another useful pawn on their side, but as long as he can protect her, nothing else matters. Carlos suddenly bursts out laughing, leaving Ragna and Musee staring at him in confusion. Carlos realizes that whether he joins them or not hardly matters. The two of them are so genuine and straightforward that he cannot help but trust them. His loyalty to Reed still weighs on his mind. Even if saving the prince puts his own life at risk, Carlos decides it is worth it. Carlos breaks into a bright smile and agrees to help, joking that his decision should not cause them any trouble either way. Ragna smirks and teases him that he might even get the chance to deal with Aliciella himself. Carlos immediately rejects the idea with a cheerful laugh, making it clear he wants absolutely nothing to do with that. Elsewhere, several women lie motionless inside a dark, run-down brothel. One woman struggles to move as a sweet smell leaves her dizzy and weak. She can only lie there helplessly, silently begging for someone to save her. Thick, fragrant smoke fills the room as the women sit or curl up on a mattress, dazed and barely able to move. She stares ahead with hollow, tear-filled eyes, desperately wondering why these horrible things keep happening to her. King Freddy sits at his desk, wondering how he should handle the situation. Earlier, Ragna cheerfully demanded an audience with a saint, leaving Freddy with a request that is anything but easy to fulfill. The Church of Rhynecia is the world's largest religion, with nearly 90% of the population among its believers. It functions almost like an independent nation, so even a king rarely gets the chance to meet one of its saints. Freddy dips his quill into the inkwell and decides to request an audience, though he has no idea whether the church will agree. He puts pen to paper and hopes the task Ragna gave him goes smoothly. The sealed letter is addressed to Rayfan. At a large stone estate, Musee stirs beneath her bedsheets as she slowly wakes up. She remembers that school is closed today and happily wishes she could stay in bed a little longer. Our girl is already exhausted by everything going on. Aliciella is still chasing Ragna's attention while he continues using his charm to break the brainwashing around them. Musee rubs her sleepy eyes and realizes Ragna disappeared somewhere early this morning. She lies there alone, realizing how strange it feels to sleep by herself after getting so used to having someone beside her. Still, she worries that getting this close to a man before marriage might be improper. For noble women, even simple physical affection is considered improper during an engagement, let alone kissing. Musee wonders what she and Ragna really are. She questions whether they can honestly call themselves lovers. After all, Ragna confessed his feelings, held her close, and even called her his bride, but he never actually asked her to be his girlfriend. Blushing into her pillow, our girl admits she would rather stop sneaking around and have a proper relationship with him. A knock suddenly comes from the door. Yuri introduces himself from the other side, catching her attention. He apologizes for waking her and invites her to spend the day with him. Musee is surprised to learn that their older brother has also arrived for some sword training. Yuri excitedly explains that their brother will be training with some of his soldier friends and invites her to join them if she feels like it. Yuri excitedly announces that they have arrived at the garrison. Knights and soldiers both help maintain order in the country. While many knights serve at the royal palace, the soldiers mainly protect and assist ordinary civilians. Yuri rushes ahead with a grin and calls out to his brother, while Musee follows behind at a calmer pace. Their older brother turns from the other soldiers and greets them with a cheerful smile, especially happy to see Musee. Musee warmly greets him, saying it has been a while. He happily agrees as Yuri watches with a grin. Their older brother casually asks whether their father finally lifted the no-contact order, leaving Musee completely confused. Yuri quickly clarifies that their father never lifted it, but insists they have no reason to obey it. He points out that Ragna was ordered to live with them by the emperor himself, so none of this is Musee's fault. Their older brother laughs and agrees, while Musee awkwardly processes the fact that her father actually ordered everyone to stay away from her. She figures her father must be furious after her engagement fell apart, and she immediately brought another man home. Musee's sweat drops as she realizes her brothers just let the secret slip. Yuri shakes his head, calling their older brother dense as usual, while the soldiers watch. Her older brother flashes a bright smile and tells Musee to take a seat on the bench and watch their training. He calls Yuri over to start the match, while Musee settles onto the bench and waves to them with a warm smile. The brothers clash swords as Musee watches from the bench, while the other soldiers gather around to watch the spar. As the blades clash, she wonders if learning some swordsmanship would help her react when someone points a weapon at her. 3 men approach her, and the freckled one asks if she is Musee Schnorr. The freckled man leans closer with a smirk and crudely suggests becoming friends, claiming he heard she gets close to any man around her. Musee stares at him in stunned disbelief, completely thrown off by his rude remark. He arrogantly continues, claiming that those filthy men cannot give her everything she needs. Musee can barely believe what she is hearing as he shamelessly suggests she would sleep with anyone and bluntly demands that she sleep with them. Musee demands to know who started the rumor, but the man casually admits he has no idea. He smirks and says the rumors about her are already spreading everywhere. Musee grips her dress in frustration, wondering how long these rumors have been circulating without her knowing. She starts to wonder whether Aliciella has been brainwashing people outside school too, or if someone else is deliberately spreading lies about her. Musee glares at him and firmly denies his claim, insisting she has never been close with multiple men. She angrily points out that he is falsely painting her as an indecent woman who sleeps around. The freckled man looks confused by her reaction, as if he cannot understand why she finds his accusations strange. Instead of arguing further, Musee suddenly smiles and changes the subject. She cheerfully tells them there is only one man who loves her. A terrifying presence appears behind the freckled man as Musee calmly asks how that man would react if he heard what they were saying. Ragna suddenly strikes all three men down, leaving them sprawled on the ground as he lands with a sharp glare. The dark aura around him fades as Musee warmly welcomes him back, while the men remain frozen in shock. Ragna flashes her an affectionate smile and admits that he missed her. With the three men still on the ground, Musee asks whether they were brainwashed. Ragna shakes his head, making it clear that Aliciella had nothing to do with this. The freckled man fumes as Ragna bluntly calls them simple-minded idiots. Ragna mocks them for believing baseless rumors without a second thought, wondering who but an idiot would fall for something so ridiculous. Humiliated and furious, the freckled man curses at Ragna and charges at him with his fists raised. Ragna instantly drives his face into the dirt, leaving him gasping in pain. He keeps the man pinned down and calmly wonders if anyone who charges into a fight without first judging their opponent's strength is simply a fool. Ragna's pupils narrow as he flashes a sinister smile and asks if the man really wants to be slaughtered. Terrified by the threat, all three men cower and desperately beg for forgiveness. Ragna calmly asks whether he is really the one they should be apologizing to. They immediately realize their mistake, turn to Musee, and bow their heads as they sincerely apologize to her. From a distance, her older brother watches Ragna and Musee as the three men kneel before them. He is amazed by Ragna's strength, but Yuri reacts furiously the moment he recognizes him and rushes past his brother with his sword in hand. Yuri glares at Ragna and demands to know why he is here. He angrily declares that he has every reason to be mad at him. Ragna simply ignores him and sits beside Musee on the bench. Ragna rests his head on Musee's lap and complains that she wasn't there when he returned. Musee explains that Yuri invited her out, but Ragna pouts and insists she should have stayed home in his arms instead. Musee looks down in surprise when Ragna quietly asks if she felt lonely without him. He blushes as he admits that he gets lonely whenever she is away, while Musee listens quietly. Ragna's eyes narrow as he confesses that he cannot calm down without her by his side. Musee points out that he was the one who left her alone that morning. Ragna admits that's true, but insists this is different. He gently presses her hand against his cheek and explains that if anything happened to her while she was alone, he would not be there to protect her. Musee giggles and calls him her Prince Charming. Ragna turns away in embarrassment, muttering that an evil dragon is not supposed to be a prince. She smiles and agrees that being an evil dragon suits him much better. Ragna looks up from her lap with a warm smile and points out that she thinks about him more than anyone else. Musee leans closer with a gentle blush. Yuri suddenly loses it and yells at Ragna to stop trying to seduce his sister. Yuri fumes in rage while his older brother and the other soldiers stare in disbelief. Even Musee is caught off guard. Her older brother cheerfully asks whether Musee and Ragna are lovers. Musee freezes in embarrassment, while Ragna looks up from her lap and repeats the word in confusion. She explains that lovers are two people who share feelings for each other. Ragna turns to her and asks if that means they are lovers, catching her completely off guard. He gently cups her cheek and declares that she is his bride, and nothing will ever change that. Ragna then admits they have yet to make a formal vow, leaving Musee puzzled. He explains that a certain ceremony must take place before he can officially call her his bride. Ragna wonders if that means they are technically lovers for now. Yuri immediately raises a hand and tells him to stop. Yuri can barely believe Ragna actually made a move on his sister without even establishing a proper relationship first. Ragna simply nods, casually confirming Yuri's accusation without a hint of concern. Yuri stares at him in disbelief and asks if he is joking. Ragna only blinks back, completely unfazed, Yuri throws his hands up, insisting they cannot be lovers if they are not even engaged. Their older brother adds that if they are neither lovers nor engaged, they should not be touching like that. Ragna blinks in confusion, genuinely wondering why they cannot. Yuri tells him to use some common sense, warning that people will assume Musee has lost her chastity to a man she is not even dating. He explains that the rumors would ruin her reputation regardless of the truth, especially since she is his sister. Ragna sighs as he tries to understand human social rules, concluding that humans are far too complicated. He turns to Musee with a charming smile and casually suggests they get engaged right now, thinking that would solve everything. Yuri quickly shuts that down, explaining that simply asking Musee does not make them engaged. He insists the engagement must be formally proposed between their families, leaving Ragna completely confused. Ragna tilts his head, admitting that he still does not understand how any of this works. He concludes that their only option is to visit his guarantor, leaving Musee surprised that he even has one. When she asks who it is, Ragna pauses to think before answering. An older man sits sternly in an ornate chair, as Ragna reveals that his guarantor is the king's younger brother.